First of all, Penn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How do we know
Yes, I
that?
can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can now. Great. So, I want to introduce Penn Parmenter. Penn and her husband Cord live down in Westcliff, and they've been growing food on their property that is just above 8,000 feet successfully for 19 years. I think it's also relevant and important that they have 3 boys who they feed off of this property. So the proof is in the happy boys there. Anyways, we're just really happy to have Penn with us today, or with us electronically, to share some of her wisdom. And because of the system here, we're going to have all questions held to the end of the presentation, and then we'll get all of those addressed where she's built in time to do questions at the end. So please just keep track of your questions, and then we'll have a little session at the end with this microphone. Okay, Penn, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. We are talking to you from on top of our mountain near Westcliff. I want to introduce my husband, Cord.
Good morning, everyone.
Cord is also, of course, it's not just me. We have been working together for, this is our 19th season. And actually, it's Cord who really discovered and started creating a bio-intensive garden. We have 3 gardens, but mine's on the rock in the trees. And as we learned and grew, Cord discovered bio-intensive gardening, which is the work of John Jevons, and a book called How to Grow More Vegetables. That is on your handout. And so he decided to go down the mountain into the soil and start digging, double digging bio-intensive beds. And now we're way down the road, and we have learned that a bio-intensive bed really does produce much more food than a different kind of bed. We've had trials where we put a potato bed right next to each other. One was just traditionally dug, and one was bio-intensive. And the traditional one produced 25 pounds of potatoes, and the bio-intensive bed produced 150. So to us, that was important, and it proved out. Now, John Jevons is a purist, of course. This is his work for 30 years. And we integrate it. We combine other methods with it. We use covers sometimes. So we're going to show you the whole story in pictures. So here we go.
Well, I want to say, too, we kind of started moving towards bio-intensive even before I discovered John Jevons, because one of the things is when you have to pick through the rock and under these difficult gardening conditions that we started out in, you want to be able to get the most out of it. So we really were concentrating, even from the early days, on really feeding the soil and aerating the soil, and we made raised beds out of wood at first. We chisel out the rock and we raise the beds above that and add soil to that, and we improved that. And we didn't really even realize what we were doing, except it just seemed to make sense. And also, when you're protecting things, it's nice to have them in a more compact area, because it's easier to protect with less cover. So that's and then of course, as Penn said, I moved down the hill because we actually have soil down there. I could actually double dig it without a pick and shovel, or without a pick anyway. And so yeah, it just made sense, and it seems to have really worked well for us. So here we go on the photos.
And also, Jennifer has the book, and I'm hoping it's the same edition. If she turns to page 21, there is a picture of a bio-intensive bed with the equal amount of food right next to a traditional gardening with row planting. And remember, row planting in the West is a great opportunity to compact soil and wick away moisture. If you're going to prepare an area, you may as well prepare a smaller area that can produce more food. So that's basically what this is about. And so here we go. This is the bio-intensive garden you're looking at down the mountain. And remember, the rock is up high, and the soil is down low where it's washed over the years. So if you have mountain property, you will be surprised to find many different kinds of soils and deposits on your land, not just a wash. I would look with an open mind. So, and since John Jevons is the steward of the soil, He is the guy teaching us that if we don't start growing soil and building soil, we're really going to be lost. We've lost so much of our soil to chemicals. It kills and depletes the soil, and then it all washes and blows away. So he's the guy that's going to save the soil, you know? All right, I'm going to click here. How do I do that? Just click it right here. Yep, okay. Here's the garden looking at it from below, and the first 16 years we didn't use covers. This was all done in the open. We started building our sustainable greenhouses, but then we started creating a lot of different covers. You can see hail guards here, a tomato house, and at the bottom there's a hoop that's just sitting there because it's already worked its way through the garden several times, and now it's just resting. This is a picture of it from behind. As you can see, a tomato house on the right. We put these right over biointensive beds, and then on the leeward side, that corn is protected from that building. We put hail guards over the most vulnerable crops, like squash, which really won't come back from hail if the crown is lost. So we choose hail guards for certain crops, and as you can see, there's a ton of food in there. This is equidistantly spaced. As you see on your handout, what is biointensive? Well, you're going to prepare the beds 24 inches. You're going to use compost. You space the plants equidistantly, which means they are an equal distance apart. And when they are adult, or when they are full size, they touch and make living mulch. So we only weed once. When they're teenagers, we take the weeds out, and the equidistantly spaced plants just fill right in and create their own living mulch.
I should add there that on the plants that are slower to grow in, like corn and stuff, then we generally will mulch heavily after we do that first weeding, and that helps hold in the moisture, keep the weeds from coming back while the canopy has a time to grow in.
Okay, compost, compost, compost. You know, we've heard a couple of times now that, you can't make compost in Colorado. I've been so shocked by that, because don't tell us. We've been making compost all along, and it's so important. John Jevons teaches you how to grow food or grow green manures to make more compost, so that you are constantly replenishing and rebuilding your soil rather than constantly depleting it. So these are simple compost bins made with pallets, and pallets are often on their way to the landfill. So this is a good thing you can use. These are mine in my tree garden, and as you can see, they weather, turn gray, and they fit into the woods that I live in, the dry woods that I live in. You can buy these things in garden magazines for $159.99. I prefer to wire together 4 pallets, and I have a great compost bin. Okay, and this is how you make compost tea. I know this is a silly little picture, but you're going to put a couple of shovelfuls of compost in a bucket and fill it with water, and you're going to steep that for 2 days to 2 weeks, and you can use that to apply. Now, this is a full fertilizer. Where like manure tea is a nitrogen fix, it's a real hit of nitrogen. We use manure teas early in the season to build plant growth, but we like compost tea for everything else because it's full. It's a rounded out, this is nature's fertilizer, and we really like to emulate nature. Now, something I wish I would have put on your piece of paper is how we make compost. Obviously, John Jevons' book is going to talk to you about that, but I want to go through this very quickly and have you maybe write it down. We call this, what did we say? The number for compost is 841-441-441. Sounds like an ad, right?
The compost hotline.
The compost hotline is 841-441-441. All right, what that means is you're going to start at the bottom of your compost with brown. We're going to go brown, green soil, and brown is dead plant material. Green is living life plant material, green, young weeds, grass clippings, something that's still green. Or herbivore manures and or food scraps. So green has three choices. Soil is, of course, living soil, the earth. Earth has life and microorganisms and bacteria and all the little people that make soil work live in there, and you need to put real soil in. So the 841 is 8 inches on the bottom of the roughest brown you can find, like corn stalks. And if you don't grow corn yet at 8,000 feet, which you'll be doing soon, you could use sunflower stalks or the stalks of mullein after you've cut the seed head off. Those make a great rough bottom for aeration. So the first time it's 8 inches. Then you put 4 inches of green on. A combination of those three things: plant material, food scraps, or herbivore manures. And then you put an inch of soil on. Now you're going to wet every time you put a layer on. Then you go to 441 from then on, and you can fill the pallets the rest of the way by layering 4 inches of brown, 4 inches of green, and 1 inch of soil again, wetting the whole thing. Now, since we live in the arid West, if you stopped on the soil level layer, you would be wicking away all of your moisture. So we cap it with a brown layer. And so that is going to hold our moisture down. Once the whole thing is wetted, it will just cook in there. So I personally do not have time to turn my compost, and I never have. I just let it cook, and you will watch that thing sink before your eyes, because those layers will start eating each other. And it just goes down like you can't believe. I pull off all the rough, take off the top mulch. I'm going to put all that rough, non-composted stuff off to the side and use in my next compost bin. And in the center and all in the middle will be black gold. And it is absolutely amazing. Now, Cord will move his compost once.
Yeah, you can actually stir your compost and aerate it more. I've even heard of people putting like pipes with holes in it through the compost as they build it up, and that allows air into there, and it will compost faster. And things do compost slowly here with our dry air and our long cool season. So sometimes you want to speed that up. I generally just stir my compost once. I'll build compost starting generally in the spring, and where there's a lot of green material, I'll cut grass. I'll put all kinds of good stuff in there, and let that settle. And I'll keep adding to that. And usually at the end, the bottom is more composted than the top. And so generally, in fact, yesterday I went down there and it was just thawing out. I waited till later in the afternoon where it was warmer, and I actually flipped it all. And what I usually do is just move it from one bin into the next. And then on that, what that does, that gives that a chance to continue composting, and it speeds up that, gets that composting process going again. So by the time I'm ready to use that compost, I'll actually have more composted material. I'll get a little bit more out of it. I want to say one other thing about compost too is John Jevons doesn't like to use manure, and oftentimes if you send in a soil test at CSU or something, they'll say, don't use manure because of the salts, and there is an issue there. One thing that I've discovered is that part of it is animals are not salt factories, so it's what we feed them. If they have, if you get your manure from a farmer who's got a lot of salt licks out there, and if he uses hay that's been grown on a fertilized field that has a salt fertilizer in it, that's going to be taken up in the grass. It's going to go into the hay and into the animal, and therefore into your compost. So I try and limit that. We try and find hay sometimes from some of the hay we get is comes from a field that is not fertilized. It's just allowed to grow, and it's great. So I don't have to worry about salt there. So I try and minimize my manure. We certainly use a lot of horse manure. We have 4 horses. We started out using a lot of manure. The French intensive method uses a lot more manure, and but I like to the compost. Regular compost is more balanced, and so I try and minimize the manure and make as much compost as possible. And what you're going to find out is, as simple as it is to make compost, it's kind of a challenge to find the materials. John Jevons actually grows plants that he knows he's going to get good compost material about. It's about 60% of his of what he grows not only produces carbon, not only produces calorie crops, but it also produces compost crops. So you can actually kind of create a circle that where what's coming out of the soil is what's going back into the soil.
All right. All right, so we're going to show a double dig where we even double dig in our greenhouses, because any bed we use, we feel it should be the best it can be. And so far, nothing can beat a biointensive bed. Real quickly, I want to ask Jennifer if she did open the book to the page, hopefully 21, that shows the difference between a biointensive bed and that traditional farming, because I'd love that to go around the room. I see that you're typing, Jennifer. Yes, yay. Okay, so here is the bed inside a finished greenhouse, and it's just the soil the way it normally is. You can see the level that the soil's at on the footer of the greenhouse. And he's going to start double digging it. We've got just a few pictures to show how this works. Well, a series. All right, so I've written down a very simple double dig on your paper. Cord, as he says, the soil should be lightly moist. If it was sopping wet, you're dealing with this heavy stuff. And if it's bone dry, it's like working with dust. So we often will water the bed a day or two before and just let it get to that nice, moist, loose ability. So what happens here, we have a long rectangular bed, and so we're going to go across. I'm going to dig a trench and remove the topsoil of the first trench and put it in a wheelbarrow. Now, you can pretend you're outside too, because you're going to need this soil either for your compost or for the last trench on the end. A shovel is about 12 inches, and this is a 24-inch dig. So you remove your topsoil, and then you're going to go in and look into the wheelbarrow. Even add the picture. It's sitting outside the door. And now you can see he is going down into the subsoil, which is rockier and more difficult. But you wiggle that shovel down in, and we're never going to flip soil. Soil has a structure, and everybody who lives where they live, that's where they belong. Topsoil people don't belong in the subsoil, and vice versa. And we have this practice of just mixing all of the soil up, or rototilling it, or flipping it. Well, they have to figure themselves out again and create structure again. So this is trying to keep the structure in place. So Cord is going to dig down in there, and he's going to, what we call, fluff the soil. He's going to lift it and kind of let it fall off the shovel. And that's all you're doing in the subsoil, is lifting and fluffing. And so he picks it up, and he just sort of lets it fall back. Does a little twist, doesn't he? There's the twist. Just to get it to fall back. You will be amazed at how high this lifts the soil up to put that air in the subsoil. So now that subsoil has been aerated and lifted. And the next step here, especially with lean alkaline soils like we have, is to add organic matter now. This is the step where you might put in some leaves, some compost, Cord, what else?
I often use horse manure, composted horse manure, not super fresh horse manure. And basically, this is kind of a thing that I do on the first double dig. Sometimes I'll double dig again. Often I will just use a broad fork to do it, but generally I just put the fertilizer or organic matter in the lower level the first time that I dig.
So the next step is to go over to the next trench and start digging. Oh, sorry, you guys, we telling the story without the pictures. There's our decomposed horse manure standing by, and he has putting in an amount of manure down in there. Again, you could use leaves or other materials to beef up your organic matter. And it's as simple as this. We're going to add during each trench, and he rakes it in a little bit to smooth it out.
Yeah, I smooth it out, and then I will go ahead and run through that again. And the second time, I'll be breaking up any big clods and stuff, and I'll be kind of mixing that in. And when I lift that will kind of mix down in. I don't flip it again. As I lift it, a lot of that will just sift down and fall down into the lower levels and kind of mix as you go without actually flipping it. So here we are. I smooth it out before I dig it again, and then I go ahead and dig that in.
And again, he's doing this little, dig and twist where he just lets that soil fall back off the shovel. without flipping. You know, the words double dig scare people, and we do not double dig after the first time. I mean, cord did it occasionally, but you do not have to. The broad fork will do the work from then on. So you prepare this area once, and we've got it down. We can dig a double bed really quickly now and efficiently. That's the thing. A friend of ours from the Rockies went to John Jevons' workshop and said, "Boy, we're in the Rockies. Are you kidding? It's hard." And he said, "You're not doing it right." So I don't know. But the point is that it is not as scary as it sounds once you understand what you're doing and why. So here he is still getting that manure down in. I know this is a lot of digging pictures, guys. It'll get better once we start growing on it. But there's that little twist and lift. And it's showing you the subsoil and the organic matter coming together. It's a lot of pictures. See, you can kind of, if we go fast enough, we can see them working. All right, so now it's integrated. Just showing the height there.
Level it back out.
Okay, so now he's going to go over to the topsoil on the next trench, and he's going to move that topsoil over and start laying it on top of the trench he just improved on top of that subsoil. So again, we're not flipping, and we're just moving the soil over. He's starting over there in the corner, and he keeps on going and just gently kind of moving it over and letting it fall off the shovel so that, you know, we cannot possibly keep the structure perfect, but we can do better than flipping it or rototilling it into a million pieces, including the earthworms. So here he goes, and we're just showing this moving over of the soil with that next trench until it's all the way over. Boy, you're working hard here, Cord. Getting exhausted just watching you. Hang in there. Here we go. All right, so this is what the second trench would look like once you've moved that soil over. Now he can go in, loosen the subsoil, add his organic matter, and move the next trench over. And on he goes all the way to the end of that bed. At the end of this bed, now where you have your last trench, sometimes John Jevons will just spread that out and save his soil for his compost, or you can bring that soil back from your wheelbarrow and put it on top at the end of the bed. And here he is raking the bed now into place, and you can see how high it rose from being at floor level there, just by adding that air. So now the roots have 24 inches of freedom. And believe me, here where plants have to struggle in the extremities, you know, to make them have to break through rock and clay, any soil can be improved. It is better for you to improve the soil you have than to have it shipped in from somewhere, because you're stealing an ecosystem from somewhere else. It's not sustainable to move soils around the world. It's far more sustainable to build soil wherever you grow. John Jevons' work goes all around the world, and you know, people in Kenya, maybe they only have sand. When they show pictures of him teaching in India, it looks like a raised bed of sand. And they carry water on their heads, you know. So these beds, he calls them living sponges. So the soil is alive, and they hold water like a dream. So besides concentrating your space, you use less water and you produce more food.
I want to say here too, after I level this out, I think John Jevons may do this in a little bit different order. It doesn't really matter as long as you get to the same point in the end. So what I do is I level this out. Now I will add an additional inch to this whole entire top of the bed, and then I will dig that in about six or 8 inches.
He will add compost, is what he was going to say. Yeah, so you didn't say compost, you said add.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes, an inch of compost. If you don't have enough compost, if you're just starting out, you know, I've had very good luck with using just old composted manure, and that's, you know, as I said, I try and use more and more compost. Sometimes as I use up my compost, I'll start, you know, adding you know, half compost, half manure to just so I get enough to cover all of my beds. But you know, the focus is you want to try and make more and more compost all the time. If you can, you know, get together with your community and get compost materials, you know, that are often just thrown away and gone to waste. then and gather that and make it a community effort, you can benefit more by it because it's easier, I think, as a community to pull these materials together than as an individual. One thing you want to watch for, though, is that what you're putting in there. You don't want grass clippings to make a great green addition to the compost, but you don't want grass clippings that have a lot of chemicals or a lot of salt fertilizer on the grass. There's a lot of stuff that people put on their grass that you don't necessarily want to use in your compost. So you want to make sure you know where those materials are coming from.
So there it is, and each year and every time you plant, you're going to add that compost on top, but you won't have to be double digging again. You're going to put that compost on top and broad fork it, which we'll show pictures of shortly. So here it is planted then shortly after, both with seedlings and by direct seed. And then we want to give you some eye candy because, we talk about our super vegetables. We believe that high altitude growing produces better, more nutritious vegetables, and actually there is proof behind that. Our short season, our cool night air, and the intense sun produces higher nutrition in the food. So we grow these Supermondo vegetables, and everyone comments on how big and vibrant the food is. And we believe the soil preparation, that 24 inches of freedom, this is what you get on top. So we're cutting the greens, and if you can see the milk jugs in the back, that's how tall those salad greens are. And I just had to show you that picture because I really want to, give you some food eye candy here about what you're going to produce. All right, so what we're doing here is a double crop. If you can see that there are tomatoes starting. Ooh, I have a pointer. Here's a tomato, and here's a tomato. They were already under jugs. We have jugs of water for thermal mass. As you can see, our greenhouses are thermal mass run greenhouses. They run completely off these barrels of water. This is one of the classes we teach, is how to create a totally sustainable greenhouse. But the point is in here we can do a double planting. The first crop is coming and the next crop is on its way in, and the soil can totally support this. And that's the other end. These are Chinese cabbages, which grow very quickly, so this crop will be out of the way before the tomatoes are going up the wall. And now this is a double planting. We have the greens still going while we're getting our summer tomatoes going, and this is what happens. They went 12 feet to the ceiling, and then they came back down. So our wall of tomatoes has been produced out of a biointensively dug bed. All right, here we are in the open garden, and here's two of our sons. These guys are going to dig a 5 by 20 foot bed, which is really typical of what John Jevons does. It's 100 square feet, so it's, you can work with them very easily. So Cord and the boys are working from the middle, and they're going to go out, and one boy's at one end, and they can knock out a 5 by 20 foot bed in how long, Cord?
20 or 30 minutes on a good day.
Did you hear that? Okay.
It depends on how competitive we get to. We'll generally break it up into 3 sections, and we'll each, two will start one at each end and then one in the middle, and we'll just kind of work towards each other.
So, yes, as you can see, they're working across in trenches on a long, narrow bed. And they're digging and just doing the double dig. And, it's not that bad, especially when you think that you have to only do it once. And they're working away in this 20 minutes. That's pretty good. I thought I would have said an hour. It just, showing the work here. And here's a boy going down, lifting subsoil, doing the wiggle. We call it the wiggle. You're kind of wiggling that shovel down in. And he's breaking in through the native soil right there on that first cut.
One thing that I learned, let's look at that last picture again, is that it's easier to dig toward the already loosened area. It's usually the hardest part is getting that first hole in the ground. And I always concentrate on making that first hole as deep and clear and clean as I can, and then everything else is dug towards that previously loosened area, and then it goes a lot smoother because you have that soil has some place to go as you're digging into it and you're prying it with the shovel. it's got some place to go, and that makes a big difference on how easy it is to go. And also the moisture level. If it's too dry, it'll sift down into sand. If it's too wet, you'll get big old clumps. So you want to, like Penn said earlier, you want to kind of, I usually will go through there and water it. If it's real dry, I'll water it maybe a couple of days in a row in order to let that moisture sink down in. But I'll wait till the next day so that it's not super wet. Usually by the next day, it's just a real nice consistency for digging.
Okay, now here are beds from the previous year, and we're going to show you how quick it is to clean this up, especially with 3 boys. We've got some old weeds. We love weeds because we constantly want compost material. So all of that, those weeds and grasses will be put aside to use in the green layer.
I want to say too here, this is kind of non-typical. There's actually 3
circles.
If you notice on the left, there's a bed. That's generally what our beds will look like. We usually not covered with grass. This one in the front was not. I can't remember what we grew in it that year, but it wasn't. It wasn't. I don't know if we even grew anything in there. But anyway, it wasn't properly mulched, and the plants didn't mulch themselves. The ones in the back you can see were mulched either by using actual mulch or by using the plants themselves as a natural mulch. And you can see there's very little grass, even though we're using grass hay as mulch at times, if you put enough of it on, you don't get the grass. This one in the front, that's actually kind of unusual. It's a lot of, I look at that though, it doesn't really scare me to have some grass and some weeds growing up. To me, that's compost material. And early in the spring, it's easier to compost your weeds because they're slower to go to seed. Later in the season, they seem to go to seed much quicker. So you can use a lot of that stuff, and as long as that compost, I always put them together in the middle so it gets nice and hot, and it will kill those weed seeds as well. So anyway, Penn, go ahead.
All right, these are 3 circle beds, and these boys are going to attack it. They're going to pull off any existing mulch. Now, Max is in the back there with a broad fork, and all he has to do now is go in and refluff the bed with a broad fork, and that's what a broad fork is. You can buy these in catalogs. Johnny's carries them, but we happen to be married to a blacksmith here who makes us our broad forks. It's very handy, and that's how it gets pulled back in those big old tines. There's no rocks, it's all loose, so up it comes, and we fluffed the soil. So it'll take maybe 10 minutes to broad fork a bed, and then another boy is going to be raking it. So 3 boys here. He's broad forking the second round now. Can clean this up pretty quick, and these beds are ready to plant in just 10 or 15 minutes. So that broad fork again does all the work, and there he's helping him. But this is, kids love it in the garden, and whether they know it or not, and our boys are just raised in the garden. They're high-tech boys, but they sure know how to plant and dig some potatoes, let me tell you. So these are nice 3 round circle beds. This is what a raised biointensive bed is going to look like. It does not have to have a frame around it. It's just raised. Ta-da! Ready to plant. Oh, take a rest. I had to throw that in there. We're a family, and we are not market farmers. We grow for ourselves. Here is Cord prepping a biointensive bed to plant squash. We're going to go through this quickly because just the pictures tell the story of how we plant squash in a biointensive bed. Cord is making squash mounds. I'm sure you've heard of doing it the opposite, where it's like a divot, to hold water. But with a biointensive bed, holding water like a living sponge, and we mulch like crazy, they love it in these hills. So we lay our squashes out because we make a map of the bed, and we know what everything is for when we want to save seed. And so there they are. Then we make a map, and then we start planting. This is where Wolfgar was 6 years old, helping us plant in squash seeds. 3 seeds on top of the hill. 1, 2, 3. Don't forget to pat it down for seed-to-soil contact. Now we're going to jug those babies right now because the squash is going to be born in a greenhouse. And these jugs are set right on top of the mound. A high-altitude farmer lady taught me this many years ago, and it jump-starts your squash by a couple of weeks. And we're pulling soil up around the jugs. That's the first step to hold them in place. And then we're going to heavily mulch them, even up to their shoulders so the wind can't catch them. We wet that all down, and now our squashes are grown in a little greenhouse. Here are biointensive beds in full production. One of them under a double covered hoop that opens for venting, and that's a hail guard again over another biointensive bed. Here they are now planted and just coming on, but you can make them whatever shape you can reach to the middle, because we never step on or lean on a biointensive bed. We only walk in the paths.
I want to go back to that last picture, and these two are kind of in together here. If you'll notice, the bed on the far right is just barely coming up. This is actually very early in the season, and that bed, that cover that you see there, on the left, is a very warm cover, and that's all my warm season plants, and you can see how big they are. But I've protected them. This is why we've started using cover more and more, because you can just extend your season pretty easily. The one with the hail guard over it actually had just a simple hoop. Those are all cold tolerant plants. We were able to plant those early, and you can see when the other stuff is just coming up. Now we've got this whole 200 square foot garden to harvest from, and stuff's just barely coming up. So to me, that's a great use of a season extender. You don't have to cover everything in your garden, but if you cover a little bit, then while you're planting, you're also harvesting, and it's great.
All right, this is moving down this garden. You see the broad fork there resting, and moving on down. Anything on the leeward side of that tomato house is going to be protected from wind. And down here are jugged plants, as you can see. And that hoop was now moved down onto another biointensive bed to start something else later in the season.
And I like to use that hoop to start my corn under. That way I can get a little earlier start on my corn and actually get a succession of corn. I've been able to get like 3 to 4 weeks of corn rather than just one big harvest at the end by using that hoop.
And we do use high altitude seed from Seeds Trust. This happens to be Candy Mountain sweet corn, which we have grown in the open for many years. That is it on the right. And I wanted to show you what's going to happen here. This is some nice squash and corn. And then it gets bigger and bigger. Remember that tomato house is protecting those corn circles. And this is, of course, intensive planting. You're going to be relay planting and companion planting. With the three sisters, you're going to grow beans up the corn. I'm sorry that's a little blurry, but you can see the purple stems of purple pole beans. After the corn is 5 inches tall, you plant a pole bean at its feet. And that bean will feed the corn by fixing nitrogen. This is what happened. This is after the fact. This is when Max was only 6'3". He's 6'5" now, but you can see the Mondo super vegetables that those beds produce. Again, a biointensive bed with a lot of squash. We grow a lot of pumpkins and squash in the open, but we hail guard certain things. This is supposed to be eye candy to taunt you, to grow lots of food. All right, John Jevons also teaches different kinds of relay and companion planting. This is a bed that is growing beets, carrots, and onions together. And as you're harvesting, they're all filling back in. The root of the carrot goes down low, and the beet stays up high on the soil. So they're great companions for intensive planting. We got 3 crops out of one bed. This is a 2-crop thing where I put in my onion sets, and then I broadcast carrot seed all around it, and to thin, you harvest. You harvest baby carrots and baby onions, and you start thinning. We produce so much food out of that bed, it just wouldn't stop. Look at how close everything is. And to get more food, you eat more food. You just keep eating it, and it just keeps producing and producing. This is that same carrot, beet, and onion combo. John Jevons' books are full of ideas like this. This is a bed that is doing potatoes, beans, and marigolds. This is companion planting. The beans help. And I just heard a ding. Did something happen? Hopefully not. All right. On the ends of the beds, we allow things to grow. This is a wild Cleome, the Rocky Mountain bee plant, this beautiful plant right here. And why would that be there? Well, it's going to attract the pollinators in. So We like companions. This is the potatoes, the beans, and the marigolds again. This is a great threesome. On the end of beds, because you could plant a perennial on the end of the bed and then, refluff the bed later and leave that perennial in place. That's a catnip, and that is an aromatic. It's going to bring bees in and pollinators, and it's also going to repel the bugs you don't want. And it's going to keep your cat happy, so she bites the tiny heads off of ground animals. Again, just more eye candy. We have a tomato hoop on top of a BioIntensive bed. And this is tomatoes in a volunteer purple Brussels sprouts. Here's one of our tomato houses. Tomatoes don't want to go below 50 degrees their whole life, so for the mountains, covering them is a very good idea. We're getting ready to plant it in. These are seed grown here on the mountain, so they are more adapted to our mountain. If you can grow your own seedlings yourself, that is going to help you as high altitude gardeners. You see the deep wells around each plant, so that when we water, they are slow soaking. And this is what happens, is Gigandor tomatoes busting out of the hoops and growing to the top. That's the holy grail of the mountains. And don't let anybody tell you you can't grow tomatoes and corn and pumpkins at high altitudes. There's a way around all of it. This is after the freeze, and this is all that we still harvested after the killing freeze. You can see we combined a biointensive bed, some thermal mass. The jugs of water heat the plants at their feet, and that cover comes off for the winter. Now we have all this wonderful compost material, of the dead plant material, and we still harvested a ton of tomatoes to bring in at the end of the season. This is moving down the mountain. These are potato beds, all biointensive and all cranking out massive quantities of food. This is putting in the potatoes with the kids. They can put a bed of potatoes in 10 or 15 minutes. And it's a family working together, let me tell you, it's not so hard. This is them digging it after the snows. As long as the ground is thawed, you can, dig. This is the happy part. Those boys love their potatoes. I mean, we all do. Lots of eye candy. Everybody's helping. And now we're digging and we're putting the mulch back on for the winter, because soil bare to our sun and wind strips it of nutrients. And you can see all these beds now are put back to bed with mulch, the mulch that we used. We pulled it off, we dug the potatoes, and we put the mulch back on. There's some Yukon Golds, huh? I love that. And these are the all blues. These are fingerlings. We do not have a root cellar, ladies and gentlemen. We need one more than anyone we know. Here's a happy boy. That's red sangre potato. All right, another quick relay planting here. You guys have seen all this, but pictures tell the story really well. Oops, in they go. I'm not clicking on something. It won't go. Hang on, everybody. I'm going to go back and see if that helps me. Maybe I'm at the end. No, I'm not. There it goes. Sorry, guys. It caught up now. We jugged them. We pulled the soil up above them. I think I'm okay there. Just like we did before. Now, this is going to jumpstart those plants. Not necessarily that a brassica needs it, but we want to hurry stuff up. Look at how deeply we're going to mulch. And now we're going to set a hoop on top. I mean, this is like awesome. And that's what it looks like in there. They're double covered now. They're in a little protective environment. This is just anchoring down the ends. We do vent these every morning and we close them up at night. This is just going to hurry us up. And that's the result. And then we're able to pull that hoop off very quickly and move it on to something else and let this food finish out. We produced a bunch of food in this one bed. That's from the other end, early potatoes and brassicas. That's that same bed again that you saw. Then we put a hail guard on it instead and let it finish out. Cord moved the hoop down and started corn. He raises the hoop with the corn, and then takes it off altogether. And again, corn and squash are companions, and they ramble amongst each other. As you can see, the squash is rambling right through the corn, and over to the right, there is a spaghetti squash hanging on the corn and just hanging everywhere. It's abundant, I gotta say. Here's a raised bed in a different way. This is using rock and just raising it up. And again, it's kind of a biointensive bed because over the years that soil will become in a structure that it creates itself. So if you have rock, like in my garden, then we have to go up instead of going down. And that's the Super Vegetables out of a raised 3-foot rock bed in front of my greenhouse. This is a relay planting in a 4x8 box bed. I'm trying to say that you can kind of do a pseudo biointensive bed in a raised bed as well. And this is broccoli and Chinese cabbage relayed. The Chinese cabbage is going to come out first, and the broccoli will continue to finish out. So you've done 2 crops in one bed by the speed of which they mature. We're wrapping up here. Here's a little hoop now that Cord made me to set on a 4x8 box bed, and it can be screwed down, and that's the tomatoes I produced out of combining some cover over a box bed. Yep, I see Jennifer, and we'll wrap up. This is a 4x8 bed, doing all my beans. I got all my beans seed from just a small 4x8 bed that was dug very deeply. Oh, here's the pictures of some food. When we take our dinner guests out, before we cut the food for dinner, you often photograph it. Guess what that is? That is a French melon. Okay, that's another, goal. Pumpkins bigger than your head? The proof is in the pudding. This is in the open, right? Anybody can do this. There's our pumpkins coming in before the first squash. The flags show the ones that have been hand pollinated, so we can save seed. We got 350 pounds of squash. And most of it is storable squash. There's the Holy Grail. Everybody just wants a red tomato. Cord's looking pretty smug. That was our first over a pound tomato. Okay, I hurried up the end, you guys, because we want to do questions, okay? So we're ready. I hope you got all that.
What is the altitude of the garden?
The question is, what is your altitude?
8,120 feet.
With the jug starters, how early are you planting and how are you watering in those jugs?
Good question. We just water the bed, and it's already moist, so we don't have to spray down in the jug. We're just going to water right on top of everything, and the moisture will be pulled by the plants out of the bed themselves. Now we'll use those jugs. If we have a cold spring and we want to get warm weather vegetables going, you can use them to buy you a week or so. But if you want to jumpstart like brassicas, cold-loving plants, the jugs can be used on either end. Just to get, like, sometimes I'll plant a whole bed and I'll only jug part of it, and those plants, then I can succession. Those plants are done sooner.
And basically, we plant the jugs about the same time under just a jug. We plant about the same time we would anyway, but it gives a little extra protection, and it's often, it may not, we may hopefully be past freezing time, we never know, but it does give it a little extra protection and a little extra warmth. And I water with a wand. I like to hand water. I get to see what everything's doing, and sometimes I will spray a little bit of a gentle spray down inside there. It kind of, as you water the bed, it gets down in the hole, but it also mostly comes up from around and underneath.
The question was about, you mentioned mulching with hay. Wouldn't straw be better since it would be less weedy?
Great question. You will love a book called The No Work Garden by Ruth Stout. It's the best bathroom read ever. She's hilarious. But she's the one that taught us all about mulch. She's the mulch queen. And we use hay because we have horses. And so we have hay. We don't want to go buy straw. You, of course, could use straw, but since we have it, it's more sustainable. But what Ruth Stout will tell you is if you're planting grass, you're not mulching heavily enough. And she doesn't even pull the grass that comes up through. She just throws another handful of hay on. So she has really proved this out, and it is true. If you mulch very heavily, you won't be planting grass.
I will say that I generally use hay, rather, where I can mulch heavily. We don't, we would avoid putting a light layer of hay mulch over like a perennial bed where that grass is going to be a problem. One thing is, in a biointensive bed, even if you plant some grass, to me that comes up next spring. That's green material for my compost. And since I'm digging and preparing and feeding that bed, it's not such a big problem. If it's a perennial food bed, then that's where you want to be more careful also. Yeah.
Next question is, what is the season for your composting? Does it freeze in the winter, and how many months of actual active composting happen?
We compost year-round. Here's the thing, like with the green layer. What I'll do is I will use up my materials until I'm out, and I will end on a brown because I know I'm going to have food scraps being toted up to the garden by boys. So I will rest the compost and wait until a few weeks pass of compost materials being sent up there, like say in the winter when I don't have green plants. And then I might add a little manure to it to finish off that 4 inches, and then I'll slap the soil on and the brown on, wetting it as I go, and wait again until I have enough green. So sometimes it happens all at once, and sometimes I'm just going through the winter, and it doesn't seem to matter. And of course, no, it's not going to be steaming necessarily all winter long unless you're really good at it. But it doesn't seem to matter. It will thaw out very early in the spring, and it just catches up where it left off. So we just never stop building compost.
But it does slow down, obviously, as it starts to freeze. I've kept compost going by keeping it active, keeping green material, keeping it stirred, well into the winter, and it's out there, it's steaming with snow on top of it. But that's, we generally don't have time for that kind of commitment to our compost, so we generally just let it build it and do as it goes. When I just moved my compost yesterday, it was in kind of a shady spot, and I actually moved it with a wheelbarrow over to a spot that was against a wall where it's warmer, and now that will pick up and start warming up and producing again. That's why I think I can get it to finish out before I really start needing it.
So this question is about the hail guards. What material are you making those out of?
Great question. The best one is out of hardware cloth, and that is expensive, but you are hopefully going to build this once. The other one, the longer one you saw, was built out of door screen, which is much less expensive. It got beat up a little bit more, but the hardware cloth actually cuts the hail into pieces. And so it's really strong.
And if you make your hail guards movable, it's better for that way you can rotate and put the hail guards where you need it. Like I said, we don't cover everything. We cover the most precious, or we cover a little bit of everything, so that we have something. If we get a devastating hailstorm, something will survive. And some stuff just seems to come through the hail better. My corn gets shredded pretty bad, but it still continues to produce even after it gets hailed on. So I don't worry so much about that. Squash, of course, is the most vulnerable, and I always protect my squash.
And just very quickly, did you have a favorite material for making the frames for those, or whatever's at hand?
Good question.
Yeah, my favorite material is whatever's at hand. I never pass up a free board if I see it laying in somebody's yard or a construction site. Wood is nice. If you're going to use like door screen, then a wood door screen stapled to the wood, and then maybe even another layer of wood over that, like a thin strip, will actually make it stronger. But the door screen's not going to hold up as well. It's really, hardware cloth is better. I used some, I'm a blacksmith and a welder, so I was able to use some old rebar I had, and that worked well. just simple 2x4s or 1x2s, or something rather 2x2s. You know, you kind of got to get creative. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. I tend to use whatever's around and what I think will hold up the best.
What are the materials you have to raise beds, particularly if you go below the surface level?
Okay, our next question is kind of two. What size mesh are you using on that hardware cloth? And when you're making raised beds, what materials are you using? And how far below grade are you installing those walls?
Well, for the hardware cloth, quarter-inch mesh is best because it'll stop smaller hail. If you have some half-inch mesh, that will also work because it still cuts it up pretty much, but you still get some leaking through. So quarter-inch is best. The beds, because we're in such a dry climate, we actually just use old boards generally for the beds, and sometimes that's old strips of plywood that we've gotten from construction sites, or just old boards, barn wood, whatever we happen to have around, and it actually holds up a really long time. We have some beds that were made of old barn wood 15 years ago and are still, some of them are actually still in use, so it will hold up for a long time. And if it's a free board, you have to replace it every 10 years. That works pretty good. But we do not go below grade generally. We generally just basically like form it above the ground.
But I dig down and then we build up.
Yeah, we still loosen the soil below it, but but the wood doesn't go below the grade.
Okay, and this is gonna be our last question, just for time reasons. The water that you're using, how important do you find it is to have it at ambient temperature as opposed to the more chilled temperature of your well?
Well, we do not have a system to warm our water like in a cistern, and I know that people do that, and it will help, of course. But nature, this whole idea, what does nature do? Well, it's burning hot sun, and then a thundercloud comes in, and it pours cold rain on the plants, and then the sun comes out again. So, that's what nature does. The plants seem to really like it, but we have a very good well. And we hand water, and we can then decide how much water to put on each bed. They don't always need so much water. And it's 42 degrees coming out of the ground. It would be great to have a cistern, wouldn't it, Cord?
Well, and one thing that we do is we water in the morning, not too early, but so after we water, then the sun comes up and shines. It has a little bit of a chance to dry off the plant leaves themselves to avoid burning, but also so they warm up quickly. If you water in the evening, and we've done that sometimes, that cold is going to stay throughout the night, so it's going to slow them down more. If you water them just before it starts to warm up, it's less of an impact. But if you can warm up your water, it's a great idea.
Yep.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Cord and Penn, and I'm not sure how well this is going to work being a unidirectional mic, but I think the audience might have something to say to you.
Thank you so much, you guys. We wish we were there with you right now.
Okay, over and out.
Over and out.
Thank you.